guys, thank you for coming to Confessions of a Sysadmin. Now, I promise that I will be completely honest and transparent through this entire talk, and that involves telling you guys that this is the hardest talk I've ever given, as I don't know how to use a mic. No, it is one of the hardest topics and talks that I've given because I don't want to say I've had a lot of enemies out of it, but I've definitely gotten a lot of judgment about it. And that's because this talk deals with the negative side of our community, especially when it comes to the Linux community and what I found when I joined. But I think all the concepts can be applied over open source as a whole. It's also a talk that I decided to write when I saw a lot of that negativity inside of me, and I saw me repeating the same patterns that I'd seen whenever I first started. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to stand before my peers, I'm going to admit my sins in hopes that we can start having a conversation on how to fix these issues. Now, before I get started, I want to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Ell Marquez, and I'm the community architect for A Cloud Guru, formerly a Linux. Sorry, guys, this thing is falling off my ear. Like that. Let's go to the hand mic. All right, yay. Okay, so I'm the community architect for a company called A Cloud Guru, and that involves doing so much. I am the co-host of Choose Linux. I'm a technology evangelist, so I come to conferences like this. I'm a training architect and did a lot of the Docker training in our environment. I used to be an OpenStack trainer, and I guess most importantly, before that, I was a Linux sysad. And I tell you guys not to say, hey, look how amazing I am. Look at all this stuff I do. I tell you this because what I am is a professional noob. And I swear I'm a podcaster, so I know how to use a mic. What entails being a professional noob is I don't take myself seriously. I dive into anything. I chase my curiosity. And so that's led to facing a lot of different communities with the acceptance of, I don't know. And last thing I want to cover is my slides are available at ellopunk.com/confessions. The reason that I put this up here is I've done my best to put a ton of learning resources into my slides. So if you have any questions about the slides, click on the section that you have a question about, and it'll give you links on how to learn more. With that, let's get started with confession number 1. And that's when I joined the Linux community only 5 years ago, I wanted so desperately to be accepted by everyone. Like, I really thought that I would go to a conference like this and everybody would be like, Elle, we're so glad you're here. You know, you want to learn something? Let's sit down and work together. And that's not what I found. What I found is oftentimes I couldn't get past the front gate. I couldn't get people to get over the being new. I couldn't get people to sit down and explain something to me without saying, how do you not know this? Without kind of judging me for being willing to answer and to ask questions. So my first confession to you all is that gatekeeping happens. I have seen a change in the community since I first started. In this last 5 years, to me, the community has really transformed. And I'd love to tell you that if you're new, that you're not going to face this issue. But the fact is that right now, we're in the middle of a war. And that's the old blood versus the new. And I'd love to tell you that we're winning so desperately. Would I love to come up here and tell you that we're winning. But the fact is that we're still in the middle of the war, and we're losing soldiers left and right. People are leaving the industry because of the negativity behind it. What I want you to learn out of this confession is that if you need help, if you face gatekeeping, reach out to your community. Because there are some of us, including myself, who are still facing this issue. Some of us that are putting our careers on the line by standing up. And that might seem a little extreme, but I can tell you, I've very much often feared being let go for my company by being one of the people that's the most vocal and standing up for other people. It's so ridiculous that even the question of what's Linux becomes a gatekeeping question. Because if I were to ask you, what's Linux? Well, if you were to ask me, I'd say, oh, it's an operating system and different distributions. And right when I got to that word, the trolls would begin to smile. And you'd see like the little hairs come up the way that you see on the Grinch, because they would tell me, oh, no, Elle, Linux is not a distribution. Linux is a kernel. And they would proceed to educate me with the history of Linux and how it started. And guys, we're past that point. Don't be ridiculous. At this point, when somebody talks about Linux, they're talking about the operating system, they're talking about the distribution, and you're not adding to the conversation. It got to the point where even our beloved dictator is being judged for this issue. You see, I got the opportunity to go to Open Source Summit, and this is huge for somebody at this point in my career. It's like going to a rock concert, because I walk into the keynote and the lights are dim, there's music going, there's a stage, and I'm that person who takes advantage of her friends, so even though I was late, I sneak into the second row and sit down. And I look up at the stage, and who's there other than Linus Torvalds himself? And I'm like, ooh, a little starstruck. I don't know that much about the man, but I'm excited. And the interviewer asks him, Linus, how do you know every line of code in the kernel? Like, how do you understand everything that's going on? And he says, I don't. And at that moment, all the laptop screens go up, the phones go out, there's light everywhere in this room. And everybody is tweeting and posting articles. Even Linus Torvalds doesn't completely understand the Linux kernel. Hoping some of you saw this. But they missed the point. They completely missed the point, because what he went on to say is he doesn't have to. He knows the end goal. He knows where the project is supposed to go. And knowing that end goal gives him a starting point. He can look at the lines before, he can look at the lines after to see if this commit is going to fit. And that to me was a little bit life-changing. It's a strange thing to say given who said it, but my lessons that I learned is what I need to do is I need to look at the big picture. I don't have to be obsessed with what the end goal is. This really is a marathon, not a sprint. And if I have a starting point, that gives me a point where I can dig in, I can learn something new, I can be excited about what we're doing again. And I also learned that gatekeeping happens. But what I learned out of that actually came from my friend Jason. Because I went to a conference and I did this talk, and he got inspired to speak right after me, went and talked to the organizers and snuck in even though he hadn't been accepted. In the middle of his talk, he stops and looks at me. He goes, Elle, do you know what a hacker is? I was, well, I mean, yes, it's somebody who gets behind the command line and breaks into systems. He goes, no, that's a thief. And he said, what a hacker is somebody who has a bit of curiosity, and they chase it, and they don't let anything stop them. They have to figure it out. And he said, Elle, you're a hacker, so why are you trying to go through the front gate? Jump over the fence and get on with what you're doing. Now, if some of you have a few questions about this, I've included Jason's website on the site that will give you more information about hacker meaning curiosity and a way that you can chase your dreams. I also included a webinar that I did that covers what the Linux issue, but you know what? You don't have to use Arch. What you need to do is pick the distribution that's best for you. Now that can carry a bunch of different aspects to it. For example, what's your workload? Are you looking to start a server? If you're brand new, I would strongly recommend that you start with either Red Hat, CentOS, Fedora, and Ubuntu. Why? Because that's where your best documentation is going to be if you're looking at running a web server, if you're looking at learning PHP to, MySQL, whatever it is that you're looking to do. So even if you're using it on your desktop, those skills are going to transcend to your job, and you can get better at it. Next is going to be, what features are you looking for? When I was looking for a distribution for my kids, I wasn't looking for package management and the beautiful GUI that I could change and command line interfaces that could use Flatpak. I was looking for something that they couldn't screw up and that didn't have easy root access, because I do have a teenager who will go for root access. So it all depends on the job that you're wanting to do. And though it may seem insulting to some people, really keep in mind your skill set. If you're brand new, you learned what Linux was at this conference, and somebody told you to go home and install Arch, ignore them. They're trying to gatekeep you. I'll call them out right now. Go and look at documentation. Just pick it, don't even install, go and look at their docs and see if they speak to you. I recently went and reviewed Solus. If you haven't listened to Choose Linux, this is new news, don't tell them that I told you all this. But I went and reviewed Solus, and I was going through their documentation, and they literally have step-by-step install pictures. Not words, pictures. Your screen should look like this. Click here. Meme of a funny cat telling you how you can screw it up. Like, this is so user-friendly, and it spoke to me. Some people might look at that and go, oh my God, that's so annoying. Why don't they just give me the white pages? Guess what? Probably not for you. But with that said, the lessons that I learned here were, use the right distro for you. Don't let anyone else gatekeep you, because I promise you, whatever distro you pick, someone's going to tell you you do it wrong. If you picked Arch, someone's going to tell you, well, why didn't you pick Gentoo? It's going to keep going. And work smarter, not harder. It's okay to have a second laptop where you're tackling Arch. It's okay for it to take you 6 months to do it or longer. It's okay to give up in the journey when you no longer have that curiosity. Don't lock yourself into a distro. I hate seeing people who treat distros like religions, and they become a religious warrior. Ubuntu is the only distro you're ever going to need to use. Learn, grow, and you know what? Go out and be a zealot for education, not for a single distribution. Overall, my message to you here is keep learning. Confession number 3. And that's when I started as a sysadmin, my team told me, use all the tools available to you. Learn how to use grep, learn how to use awk. And when I said, you know what, the easiest thing to do is to use the GUI, I was completely pushed aside. I was told that I would never be a good admin. I would never be a real admin if I continued to use the GUI. I think this is such a ridiculous statement. And like everything in life, there is an XKCD comic to explain this point. And I'm gonna get some water. All right. I know that we all would love to be in that moment, like, oh, I got this. And I love presenting this at conferences, especially when it's not a Linux conference, because I can see people doing this. Like they're trying to figure it out in your head. Guys, you're never going to be in this situation. And if you ever are, I mean, we're already done with to begin with, so this is never going to happen. And the reason I judge people is this becomes such a fighting issue of how do you not know this? Of course you know the flags. The flags are whatever. You know what I do? I go push the button. Simple as that. And I went to a conference where I presented this, and the guy's like, well, actually, Ell, unzipping and G-zipping, and I'm just like, oh my God, no, I don't care about your tar file. My file opened, I got it to work, have fun. The most interesting part was when I went to go take a certification test. And now I'm going to tell you that I can't tell you what certification test that is because I'm under an NDA. But if you go to my LinkedIn, strangely enough, all my certifications are listed there, so I'll tell you this one. But I went in, and I'm in the room, and I'm taking it with several other people because it's proctored. I go and I turn it on, and all I hear is tap, 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 like angry tap, tap. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I'm reading it, and we're having to set up networking. And what people are doing is an MCLI, tap, tap, board, tap, tap, what's the next thing? You know what, I went and clicked on the corner with the little icon about networking, and then I filled in the boxes, and I moved on. And that's my lesson to you, is learn to use all of your tools. Look, if I invited you over to my house because I'm decorating, and we need to hang some paintings, and you show up with a wrench, we can get the job done. Trust me, I've done it before. But if you showed up with a hammer, our job's going to be a lot easier. Like I told you guys before, work smarter, not harder. Learn to use the tools in the appropriate use case. I'm not telling you not to learn the command line. If you want to go work for a web hosting company, if you want to learn how to use Ansible, if you want to learn how to program, yes, you are going to need these tools. It doesn't mean that you have to use them in your day-to-day. If you reach that breaking point where you no longer like what you're doing, step away and just get the job done. Confession number 4. Anybody who went to my talk yesterday knows how much I agree with this one. Technology just sucks sometimes. Yesterday I gave my talk called Saving Lives, and it's a subject I'm very passionate about. I have cried putting that talk together. And it was something I really wanted to impart with people, except when I found out I was giving it, I was on the plane, and the talk was no more than an idea in my head. So I'm putting all the slides together. I get in the room, I'm nervous, and we can't get the slides up on the screen. And the way that I have my stuff set up, I either get my slides or my notes. So you know what? We went slide-free, and it was terrifying, and I got off the stage, and I was just broken about it. But the fact is that I got to get over it. That's not my fault. It is not my sin to bear. It's just technology sucks. Thank you. And this is one of my favorite tweets because I was so down on myself. Look, I was trying to start Kali in a VM. I've been using Linux for 5 freaking years. How can I not get a VM up and running? So I posted this, and that kind of led me to remember that community really does matter. Because what somebody came back to say is, learning from a failed attempt is not failure. Sometimes software is just goofy, and it's not the operator. And I kind of discounted this message to begin with. I was like, yeah, whatever. Hundreds of people can get Kali running. That's just me that can't. And then I had hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating, people telling me that they'd faced the exact same issue. Like, oh, use the OVA. That's obviously broken. Well, it wasn't obvious to me because I spent the entire day feeling like a failure. So how do you deal with this? Well, I'm going to tell you that the community doesn't always do this. Because I've been distro hopping for a while for our podcast, which means that I change operating systems every 2 weeks. As you can imagine, not every one of them was a winner. And I would go on Twitter asking for help, being like, all right, community, I need you right now. And I'd get somebody going, well, what do you do? And I got tired of that, and so I decided to call them out on it. And I built a GitHub, in which I put every single screenshot of what I did, I dumped my history file, and I put my error logs in. So when somebody came and said, well, Elle, what did you do? I'm like, oh, here's example exactly what I did. Here's the error logs. You're going to help me troubleshoot, right? Nothing. So call your community out. Don't be afraid. There are plenty of us, like I told you, who are out there fighting. We'll help you. And honestly, I didn't have to confront the trolls because plenty of people came to my aid. Which leads me to confession 4B. And this one's hard to admit, but I've kind of admitted to it a bit throughout this talk, and that's when things don't go as planned, I blame myself. I come out here and talk to you guys, and I tell you not to do it, and I preach the word, and then I go home and I blame myself for all of my limitations, even though the limitations are often on the technology and not my ability. And I think that the perfect story for this is when I transcended from a Linux baby to a Linux toddler. And that is, okay, so I'd been on the floor as a Linux admin for 6 months. I finally understood what my job was, and they left me off the phones. I could actually work on customer service now. And you have to remember, or I guess I have to tell you, that when I was a Linux admin, they didn't put me in the baby area. They threw me in multi-million-dollar accounts. I was working with banks and huge companies, which I'm not allowed to say, but I really like cereal. And so I'd finally gotten there, and my team had decided, was going to get my 3rd monitor. Now, if you've ever worked for a company that is a cheapskate, you know that your 3rd monitor is a big deal because the company doesn't give it to you. Your team goes out and they steal it from you for somebody that left. So I got my monitor, and I'm really excited, like my mentors believe in me. And I put it on my desk, and I plug it in, and nothing, black screen. Okay, display, nothing. Spent about 30 minutes working on it, and I'm like, oh, they're going to take it away. So I go around trying to talk to people about it, and my friend Allie, who helped me write this talk, was going through the same deal. And she tells me that she went to her mentor. Her mentor looked her right in the face and said, how do you work here? Followed up by, well, if you're a real Linux admin, you'd use Arch. And she spent the rest of the day trying to figure out how to install Arch on her computer. I was really lucky that my mentor Corey and my mentor Kevin were a blessing. They never judged me for what I didn't know. They always put it on themselves. It wasn't how do you not know, it was how have we not taught you yet. So I went to them and they sit down, and Corey to me is a Linux god. So he's sitting there on the command line and he's like, I can't get it to work either. Mind blown on my behalf. So Kevin comes over and he's like, oh, this is an interesting bug. Hey, Elle, you get to learn how to write a bug report. And we went all the way up to the top of our company, who then filed the bug report with Red Hat. Wasn't my bad, but plenty of people, including Allie, were made to believe that it was their lack of skill on why this didn't happen. And this led to my lessons. What I learned is it's okay to be new to things. Every day is going to be something new. You're not going to be perfect at everything you learn. And that means it's okay to fail sometimes. And honestly, I'd encourage you to push your skills to the point where you're failing, because that is when you're actually learning something new. But most importantly, enjoy the journey. Seriously, why are you doing this if you're not having fun? Does this mean that I love my job every single day? No, trust me, follow me on Twitter. You'll hear everything. I air all my dirty laundry. But at the end of the day, when I was at dinner last night, somebody asked me, if money wasn't an issue, what would you be doing? And I really thought about it. I'd still be doing this because I love what I do. Secondly, join the community. You don't have to do this alone. There are plenty of people out there who are willing to talk Linux with you. So join us on chooselinux.show, shameless promotion there. But really, we will tell you what distribution we're hopping to about a month before. Take the journey with us. Communicate with us. Tell us what issues you're having. You would be amazed at how much you can learn when we're working together. And be willing to share your journey. I'm lucky enough that my company was crazy enough to give me my own podcast with all of like 6 months worth of experience. And I started documenting my journey into InfoSec. And I would run into a problem where I didn't know what to do, and I'd throw it up on Twitter, and somebody, oh, it's really easy. And I said, if it's easy, come podcast with me and teach everybody else. I'm not looking to hoard knowledge for myself. Confession number 5. Despite all this, and despite telling you that I air all my dirty laundry, I'm still actually really scared to admit what I don't know. I feel that because of my job, everyone expects me to be a subject matter expert. I wrote training on Docker. Now this is Docker 101, and people still look at me like I'm a complete fraud when I don't know Docker networking. I was asked to help during a Kubernetes workshop today. Even here, you would be amazed at how many people discounted me when I didn't know how to fix their specific issue on Kubernetes, even though I haven't used it for over a year and I admitted to that. I just wanted to help because the workshop wouldn't happen if they didn't get volunteers. But you know what? This is me most days. That's me on Twitter. It's okay not to know. It's perfectly fine. Like I said before, if you're not hitting a point where you don't know, you're not learning. In fact, often whenever we interview people, that interview doesn't start till you say your first I don't know. Because then I learn how you troubleshoot. I learn how you think, and I learn whether you're going to be a fit for our team. Which kind of goes to this, which is one of my favorite comics. Which leads to the rest of confession number 5. Guys, if you're going to come ask me for help, and you know I want to teach, I am there. But if you ask me a question that I can tell that you haven't bothered trying to answer at all on yourself, you know what? I'm going to gatekeep you. I'll own it right here. And that's because you don't learn anything if I just tell you and you've done nothing. And as much as I hated it when my mentors told me this advice, I'm going to tell you guys. Go ahead and read that friendly manual. One of the things that I want you guys to know is what separates a baby sysadmin from a senior sysadmin is one thing. They're Google foo. Googling is a real skill. Don't go onto Google and say, what is the protocol that? You have to learn how to choose your words. Somebody just cringed over there. You have to learn how to choose your words, use the expressions, specify what site that you're searching for, because that's really what's going to set you apart. And there's a few people who are like, I don't use Google. Do you know what they do to your privacy? Fine, use DuckDuckGo. Same concept. But don't limit yourself to that. There are plenty of people in this community that have dedicated to making their project better. So let's talk about Stack Overflow. This is a very important resource to me. And that's because Corey Quinn gave me one of the best lines. There are some of us that are front-end developers. There are some of us that are back-end developers. There are some of us that are Stack Overflow developers. And that just stuck with me. But if you go and use Stack Overflow and you put your question in, and then later you come back and say solved, I hate you. Tell me how you solved it. It happened once that I was looking for the answer for a question, and I found my question from like 2 years ago that was the exact same thing. And I'm scrolling up, and then I find my answer, and I documented it, and I was like, wow, past me is amazing. With that being said, also rely on the documentation for a project. Now, I'm the first person to call out that there's a lot of projects where their documentation sucks. Fair enough. As much as I rag on Arch, their documentation is amazing. I have used it so many times for other distributions that aren't Arch, but contribute to those projects that you use. If you go to the documentation for a product and you can't figure out the answer, and then you figure out the answer and you stick it on your own personal wiki, again, I hate you. Go contribute it to the rest of us so we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. And that brings me to the lessons that I learned here. Google is your friend, documentation is your friend, and write the freaking docs. Confession number 6. I don't have a CS degree. I have absolutely no training when it comes to computers. In fact, I'm a theology major. My biggest dream in the world growing up was changing people's lives. I wanted to give away all the comforts that my parents had worked so hard to give me and go to a country where I could give back to someone else. I wanted to learn how to live off the grid. And in fact, when I graduated college with my amazing theology degree, I did go live off the grid for a while to learn what it would be like when I went there. And at some point, life went really, really bad. I have a whole talk about that. And I found myself in a situation where I was almost homeless. And I had a situation to go to some Linux training that they were going to give for free because I was a woman. And you know what? I took advantage of that diversity card. And I went and I learned how to use Linux. And my first day on the job was the first time I owned a computer. What set me apart, what made me good at what I did, was I was curious. I can't help it. I want to learn things. And that kind of puts me in my next confession. Part of this one is, yeah, I attended a boot camp. And you know what? It didn't make me a command line ninja. Too many boot camps are just obsessed with getting you to pass that test. They're a test dump, and that's not going to get you anywhere. Because I promise you, when you step in that room, we smell our own. And if all you know is the answers to those questions, but I start asking you about your home lab, and you're like, what's that? I don't have one of those. Okay, well, what do you do in the cloud to set it up? Oh, well, I read this book. Guys, nothing beats hands-on practice. And I'm not telling you that to be gatekeeping. That's seriously what you have to do. If you want to work with Linux, you're going to have to touch that keyboard. And that kind of leads to the next confession here. And that's, I chase certifications like they're wild geese. Seriously, it's one of my favorite pastimes. But I'm going to tell you that despite having spent thousands of dollars on certifications, it's never gotten me anywhere. I got my first job because of that boot camp, and every job that I've gotten since has been through community building. When I needed a job, somebody said, you know what, have you talked to Elle? She's really great, let me get her in. I've passed the front gate that way. The certifications that I get, I do for myself. I got my Red Hat certification when one of the admins on my floor did a ticket review for me. And he looked at me and he sent me an email attached with my boss that said, I could automate you. I felt like I didn't know anything. I wanted to leave my job. I was a poser. There was no way that I could be a Linux admin. I only had 6 weeks of that boot camp. So I studied for the cert, and I passed it for myself to prove to myself what I knew. And then I got my AWS certification. I actually got my OpenStack certification. I forgot to put it on here. And right now I'm working for my CompTIA certification. I'm striving to get my Security Plus. Not because it's going to really do anything for me, but because somebody said, Elle, if you want to know InfoSec, you have to learn the terms. You have to be able to speak logic problems and cross-site scripting. You have to condense your language because we have a short attention span and we'll forget what you asked. That was difficult for me, but you know what? I'm trying, and I'm going to go and I'm going to take the test, and if I do pass, that's awesome. That's for me. I got a little badge for myself. And if I don't pass, it's going to give me an idea of what things I need to focus on so I can better learn the lingo and people will accept me as part of their community. Because despite everything I've said, I still have that feeling inside of me where I just want to belong to a community. So the lessons that I learned here is nothing beats hands-on experience. I can proudly tell you here, even though I was embarrassed at the time, that I am the first and only person at that boot camp to reach kernel panic level. That also means I was the first person to learn what a thin client was, because luckily they didn't trust us on real machines. I'm the first person to learn what backups were and how important they were. And I was the first person to learn how to restore my environment from a backup. I worked with enterprise-grade accounts, and I can't tell you how many times those skills came in handy. The next thing is labs. Look, it's well and fun to go in and use Linux as your desktop environment. But if you want to do more, then you have to actually go in and play with things. Set up a virtual machine, download Ansible, get a cloud server, play with that. It's going to cost you pennies. Plenty of these organizations will give you small servers to play with. And another shameless plug, if you go to a Cloud Guru, we have a cloud playground for you to play with. All right, but seriously, it's not only your knowledge that's going to set you aside. Do you really want to set yourself aside in this community? Do you want people to know your name? Do you want people to put you up for that job when it comes up? Then give back. Teach others what you know, because I will challenge you right now. You can think you're the best at anything, but if you can't sit down and teach it to somebody, you're not as good as you think you are. Confession number 7. I've used a Mac OS box to do Linux sys work. And guess what? I didn't hate it. And that's because Mac protected me from myself. Do you know how many Linux admins that I saw spend more time trying to fix their own box because of an upgrade they tried to do? And I don't mean like apt-get update, I mean their upgrade that they tried to do. Mac has a certain amount of control where I couldn't screw myself up. I still had my environment, and I could still work on Linux work because I just SSH into a box, and guess what? I was on Linux. Which kind of leads to this next one, and I double said it there. All right, which leads to this one, and some of you already know this, and I'm hoping I don't have to run off the stage for this now, is I'm using Windows right now. I used to tell people with this badge of pride, you guys don't understand how prideful I used to see it when I would say, I've never used another OS other than Linux. I was never a Windows user. What I was admitting to right there is that I went into this industry with one hand tied behind my back. I let pride get before knowledge, because I want to transition into InfoSec now as part of my job. Guess what? A majority of the boxes are running that I'm going to need to be able to pen test and protect. You know what's making a lot of money right now because it's the new buzzword beyond Kubernetes? WSL. Do you know who has a really easy time learning WSL? Linux admins who know how to use Windows. I've screwed myself over. So you know what? I'm standing at a Linux conference right now using Windows, and though I fear for my life a little bit, I'm not ashamed. The process of learning Windows, guys, was not easy. It's not as easy as we all make it out to be, like, oh, you really want to learn how to use a computer, use Linux. You know what, I can spin up a new computer every single day. It took me 4 days to try to figure out how to do a USB install of Windows. Like, I'm using a Linux box. You can't do that and put on a USB for Windows. It was horrible. But I got on, I got my computer on, I installed WSL, I used Visual Studio Code, once again, don't throw anything, and I was able to write my page, push it through WSL into GitHub, up to Netlify, and build my page. And let me tell you guys, I did a happy dance. And I got on Twitter and I celebrated my success. After everything that I've done on Linux and my career and everything, this was one of my most shining moments because I did it by myself. I read the docs, I set it up, I didn't break it, and I didn't have to ask anyone for help. It was awesome. On a side note, though, I'm telling you guys a lot of things that require a lot of resources. I'm telling you to have a secondary box. I'm telling you to have, environments to play with. On a side note is you don't have to have a lot of money to do this. You don't have to have an obstacle. Like I said before, I don't talk that much about it, but I was in a situation where my children and I were almost homeless. I didn't have the money to go buy a computer, and everybody says, oh, you should have just gone to Goodwill and bought a computer. No, we're at the situation, if I'd done that, my children wouldn't have eaten. It was bad. And let's be realistic, because after all the hops I've done, buying hardware at Goodwill is going to screw you over because it has the worst amount of resources. You're already trying to play with an unfair playing ground, and now you're setting yourself up for failure. Nothing against Goodwill. When there is a dedication, where there is a curiosity, there's a way. And this is a wonderful man who I forgot to put his name on my notes, but he's teaching in a small village in Ghana. And he's trying to set his students up for success. So he is drawing exactly what a word processor looks like and all of the icons that are going to be on top so that these kids can get a leg up on the market. And he did that with several different types of software. If you are in this room and you've had to borrow money to come here, perhaps your scholarship, and you need help, talk to someone in this room. My distro hopping machine right now is one that was donated to me by a wonderful listener of Choose Linux. And I mean, I couldn't accept it. I was like, no, I can't do this. This is too much. And he told me that it's one of the laptops in his pile of e-waste that he just can't get rid of because he collects all these old laptops. I promise you, a lot of people in this room have the same pile, and they're going to be willing to help you out. When I was trying to start learning and I didn't have a computer, somebody made a live USB for me. And I would go to the library and I talked to the librarian, told her my situation, and she would allow me to boot it on the computer at the library so that I can learn. Curiosity, guys, is what's going to set you apart. Reach out to your community. Somebody in here probably has a pocket full of live USBs. So if you've been listening to all this and you're like, all right, Elle, I get it. There's its downside and there's its good side. But you know what, Elle? I'm curious. I want this. I want to be set aside. Let me give you a little advice that I've learned on how to get started. First and foremost, choose Linux, or choose Mac, or choose Windows. Whatever it is, you can continue to learn. I know people hate on it a lot, but virtual machines can really set you aside. I'm learning Kali Linux at the same time that I'm learning Windows. I set it up in a VM and I can learn both at the same time. Your journey doesn't have to be limited, and if you become a zealot of one operating system, you really are limiting yourself. Learn automation. Now, this is one that I really struggled with because there's Chef and there's Ansible, and I don't know what to learn. Learn whatever works for you. You know how I started learning Ansible? It's because I distro hopped so much that I was trying to figure out how to make sure that my backup's always loaded up and then I had my environment figured out exactly the way that I wanted. Is that completely over-engineering something? Absolutely. But if I ever go apply for a job and they ask me if I know automation, boy, do I have a story to tell them. And this one I have fought tooth and nail, and I'm still fighting it, to be honest with you guys, and that's learn scripting. I'm not a developer. I can't think the way that these magicians do. They create something out of nothing, just a blank page. And my mentor, Corey, who I talked about, used to tell me, you have to learn scripting, Elle. It's just so essential to your career. And he would stay after work, and he would sit there, and he would try to teach me, and I would try to learn, but I was so stuck in my ways that I didn't need it, that I wasn't paying attention. 3 years after the fact, you don't know how badly I'm kicking myself. Because my chances of doing so many things would be so easier if I could just run a one-liner instead of a 15-line bash script. And that goes to have fun. You have to have fun if you're wanting to do this. I hit a part of my job where I didn't listen to my advice, and I wasn't having fun, but I just kept telling myself, just push through it. You'll get there, right? You'll enjoy the journey again. This is just part of the job. And the only thing that happened is I hit burnout. And it was ugly. Burnout and depression mirror their symptoms, and you will internalize everything that you never would have. If you catch yourself no longer enjoying the journey, pivot. Find something that you'll enjoy, even if it's just for a month. Give your brain and yourself a chance to breathe. Okay, so there's some of you who are standing out there going, okay, I don't know if I should have come to this talk. It's really just targeted to new people. So my advice for you, I usually say neckbeards, but I'm going to go with graybeards, is all of the advice that I've given today also applies to you. And this is the part where I make enemies, and I'm perfectly okay with it. If you are not learning and you are not growing, you've become stagnant. And if you've become stagnant, you've become the old blood, and I'm telling you, just get out of the way. You've become worthless in this industry. Kubernetes is changing every 6 months. OpenStack is changing every 6 months. Hell, sudo just got an upgrade to what, 1.9? You have to keep learning in this industry. So, you can use Arch, fine. Use whatever you want, but continue to learn and play with your tools. Have you ever thought about maybe building your own Linux? The mentor that I talked about earlier, Kevin, was getting bored with his job, and he has a curious mind, so he built his own Linux distribution called Kubuntu. It worked great. I mean, he probably is still using it to this day. My favorite Linux distribution ever. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore, but it was Aurora. Look, I have broken every single operating system that I've used except Aurora. Developer did it for fun. He just came up with it, he was writing it, he was doing it for his own skills, and then he open sourced it. Nobody else took it, unfortunately, and he closed the project down when he wasn't having fun anymore. And I still write him mail asking him to continue. True story. Distro hop. Have fun. There are new distros that are coming along every time, and some of them suck. Do you know how to develop? Contribute to the project. Write documentation back to the developer that is not your distribution sucks. Give him ideas. Look at the logs. Tell him what was going on. Many of these distributions are passion projects for people, and they love your constructive feedback. Give back to your community through knowledge, if I haven't made that clear enough. The new blood, we want your mentorship. We want your help. What we don't want is you to be condescending. Don't tell me, how do you not know that, and proceed to preach to me. Sit down. Teach me how to learn something. Yeah, I can read the docs, and I probably have, but what I can learn in 4 weeks of reading the docs, I can learn in maybe 40 minutes of you sitting me down and showing me what I'm supposed to do. And what about that hands-on experience that I told you about? I know that this isn't an InfoSec conference, but guys, these tools are going to be invaluable to your journey. Are you new to Linux? Go to Over the Wire. They have a Capture the Flag contest, and if you go to these slides off my website and just click on it, it will take you there. So I see all the cameras out. If you just go to the very first challenge, like you know nothing about Linux other than what you learned here. Click on the first one, and your first flag is going to be learning how to use the man pages. Your next one is going to be learning how to use grep, then cat. And it just builds up your skills to the point where I'm learning reverse engineering now. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm trying. Try Pico CTF. This is a great one because it's targeted towards high school students. And once a year, it goes live. You can form teams of 5 people. And the way that I form my teams, it's me, the newbie. I have somebody that does web app penetration, and I kind of cheat because he's actually a teacher that teaches it. I have somebody that does malware analysis, and you know what? I build my team around that. And I take all the easy flags, so they usually leave step 1 and 2 for me, and they jump in at 3. But what I do for the team is I document. And we write up every single flag that we've captured, how we capture it, and the resources that we used. That way I contribute to the team, I contribute to the community, and I'm learning new things because I'm writing up what they did. Of course, I got to give a cloud guru a little bit of a plug here. We do have hands-on learning. My favorite right now, though, for those of you who I call neckbeards, and I do it lovingly, I promise, not so much, is Hack the Box. When you go to Hack the Box EU, you're going to get a page that's asking for your invitation. So when I got this, I called my friend, and I'm like, hey, apparently I have to be invited to do this. You know, can you invite me because I know you're on it? And he laughed and hung up the phone. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, what? So I call him back, and he goes, Elle, what CTF are you trying to do? Hack the box. Do you have an invite? Elle, what CTF are you trying to do? Oh, hey, I have to hack the box to get in. Just a warning there. All right, so for all of you who are listening, I know some people are on the phones, like everybody put your phone down, listen. I know that people have jobs to do, but I have one final lesson for you. And if you get absolutely nothing else out of the talk, listen to this lesson. And that's, it's okay to be new. With that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have. Oh, wait, I also get to bribe you guys. If you want to come up, I have Choose Linux stickers, I have It's Okay to Be New stickers, and my favorite, because we all do it, is I have User Error stickers. All right, but seriously, any questions? Yes?
Pile comments, no real question. One, you paint me with a problem. That documentation you're talking about is my favorite user ever. Because I can walk through these steps and see what happened and recreate it. If it's possible, I would absolutely love that. Also about the tool sets, yeah, I've been on Linux for about 20 years, I use masters, I can play with my tools.
Amen. So lesson learned from him, document. Anybody else? All right, thank you very much for your time, guys.